Hey, welcome back to our live. It's been a while since we did our last live session. And today I want to talk straight to our doctors, surgeons, and medical researchers who are flying out of the country, out of Bangkok this year to present at international conferences. So most of you, maybe you have like a great abstract that you presented somewhere, and the international doctors, so they accepted your data because it is world class. And our goal today is to match your language with the quality of data that you present to your peers. So most of you, maybe you are going to the US, UK, or Italy, Rome, just to present your findings. Like what did you try to research about? And it's a common fear. So on stage, you are not just a doctor or a researcher, but you are a keynote authority. So imagine like you're talking to a group of people who are also in the same field, like scientists, doctors, and it can be excruciating and it will lead to anxiety because everyone is trying to observe your paper or maybe your data, and then they will try to compare with their own research. So you will always feel judged, and that is a common fear. So even like the president, when they talk in front of many people, like when they stand in that stage in that podium, they sometimes ask, did I do great? Did I speak well? Or did I deliver the data? Did I give justice to the data? So that is a common fear among doctors, researchers in the medical field. And if you remember, like a few years ago, there's this movie of a woman named Erin Brockovich. You pronounce it like Brockovich, Erin Brockovich. So this is based on a true story. So Erin wasn't a doctor or even a lawyer. So she was a legal assistant. So working for a lawyer who looked at raw files and noticed an anomaly. So there was a pattern. She saw that families are getting sick and some of them are getting cancer and serious illnesses. So she was bothered, and the entire town, I believe it's in California, if you're in the same age as me as I am. So it was, I think, early 2000 when they showed the movie of Erin Brockovich. So she was a legal assistant, and there's this massive utility company who are paying for the medical bills. And since she observed that there's a pattern and most people are getting sick, getting cancer, so she went down to the water board and tried to look at the raw data. And with this raw data, she had a, she has the ability to connect the dots. So she found that in this data, there's a high concentration of chromium, or what they call hexavalent chromium. And she was able to link it with the specific clinical outcomes, which is composed of like the cancer and other diseases. And what's the lesson with her if we connect it to her story, Erin Brockovich? If the data just sits inside a folder or a book or maybe a textbook, so that data will not win without someone defending it. So imagine you're in the same situation. You are a doctor, a researcher, and you have the supporting evidence. You have the data, but you cannot express yourself well. You cannot try to connect with your audience, with your fellow researchers and scientists. So it will be hard for that data to see the day of light or be noticed. So maybe you need some funding with your research. So how can you sell your data if you don't know how to communicate it well? So because of Erin Brockovich, her voice, so she was a good communicator and she communicated it with absolute, unshakable authority to the gatekeepers. So we have gatekeepers, which are the body who is approving the funds, or maybe if you're trying to prove something like there's a health risk because of the water system, like what she did. So she was able to communicate it well, and I believe they won like 333 million dollars. So that was the biggest lawsuit during that time in 1996. Okay. So as doctors and researchers, you do the hard work in the lab and the clinic. So how will you give that justice? So you need someone to communicate to the other scientists and interpret those findings. Like, for example, the elements in the water. Okay, so if you stand in front of an international stage and you just read your slides like a robot, so most probably your data or investors or maybe those who handle the funds will not give you the necessary funds if they're not convinced. Okay, so that's a lesson about the situation of Erin Brockovich, and it's how you frame your findings to your audience so that your audience understands the high stakes reality of the result you're trying to give or the situation. Now, moving on. So this is just to inspire you. Like, uh, it's exceptional. So sometimes those things happen. Like, there's this activist, like with the young people, we have Greta Thunberg, right? So she's also like an activist fighting for climate change. So it's the same thing. So these stories are rare, and but we're still hoping that maybe you can be in that situation where you found like a loophole, and this will be like this will revolutionize your field. So maybe you're in the medical field, or you're an environmentalist. Okay, now let's look at the weak passive transitions. Okay, so normally when we are presenting our paper in a conference, normally what we do is we just say that next slide, please. So maybe you have an assistant with you and you just say, next slide, please. Next slide, please. And that's not wrong, but it sounds a bit junior. Okay. So to up your game, you need to come up with phrases or sentences that will provide an impact. So it's an impact transition thing. So instead of saying, next slide, please, you can say, this brings us to the core objective of our phase 2 trials. So it depends on your slide. So you study your slide. If your next page or your slide number 2 is talking about your objective, so you can use this phrase. This brings us to the core objective of our phase 2 trials, and just sound confident. And maybe you can just show that you have like an open posture like this, and then you're not keeping things like you have a pen and then you put it across your your chest or something. So just present as if you are presenting to a panel. So imagine you are trying to defend a thesis and you're just presenting the data. Another weak passive transition is, as you can see here, this is the data. So it's common sense. So we are all scientists. So we all know that this is the data that you're presenting to us. Instead of saying that, so you can say to see how this variable impacted our primary outcomes, let's look at the data. Okay, so that's a powerful impact transition. And you don't need to explain the details, like you are scientists, so everyone, so they are familiar with variable. When you say variable, there's an independent or independent variable. Next is, this graph shows the patient survival rate. That can also sound basic. Instead of saying that, you can say, what these clinical outcomes reveal is a significant statistical shift. Let's look at the data. With those words like significant, statistical shift, so most probably the one who's listening is like someone who's knowledgeable with statistics or graphs. So they already know, they're an expert in data. So you don't need to point it out that this graph shows, so it's very basic and sounds like a junior. But when they hear the word significant statistical shift, so it means, okay, so this is relevant. Okay, I'm listening. What's next? Okay. Next is the 80-20 rule of academic medical verbs. So 80-20, like the Pareto principle or Pareto principle. 80-20, like what we talked about before. 20% or 80% of your results come from the 20% of what you do well. So you should determine that 20%. So you don't need to know everything. So doctors, especially non-native speakers of English, so they think that they need more medical vocabulary, but in reality, they don't. So you already know the complex things like anatomy and chemistry. So what you lack is the strategic connector. Okay, so those are verbs that you need to transition to the next phase or story. Maybe your so it's like when you're presenting like a data, you're also telling a story. Okay, so you present your findings, and then maybe you have a hypothesis and you have this test, a blind test, double blind test, so you can transition using strategic connector verbs. So what are the weak verbs? So when we say we'll look at the numbers, again, it's very junior. A better way of saying it is we audited the clinical variables. So when you audit, it's like you check. But audit sounds a bit more fancy. So you will get the attention of the board or maybe the other doctors or researchers. Next is, this proves that. Okay, so we all know that you're proving something, that's why you are presenting the data. So instead of saying that, you say, this data strongly corroborates the hypothesis that. So you connect it with your hypothesis. If going back to Erin's data, so you can say, this data strongly corroborates the hypothesis that the chromium levels in water causes diseases in our hometown or maybe in California. So it causes cancer. And then you link that to related literature or related studies that explains how the high concentration of chromium can lead to cancer. When you say corroborate, so it's different from collaborate, okay? When you say collaborate, you try to help each other. So you collaborate with someone to come up with something great or something awesome. So artists collaborate, scientists also collaborate. So you help each other in order for you to achieve a desired outcome. Okay. Next is we think this happens because. So it's very basic, you know? So, like in Thai, we always say, you are professional, คุณหมอ คุณหมอพูดภาษา คุณหมอ okay พูดภาษาวิทยาศาสตร์ so you speak the language of a scientist, okay? So for our friends in the Philippines, you say, okay, doktor ka. So if doktor ka, dapat alam mo kung paano i-communicate or kung paano i-interpret yung data, right? So you try to make it easier to understand. So instead of saying we think this happens because, so you can say we attribute this anomaly to, or also in the Philippinism. So when I was in college and I was writing the thesis, so a friend of mine, he asked me to translate or to edit his thesis. And most of the time he writes, maybe because, maybe because, maybe because in the Philippines, we always reason out like, siguro dahil, right? So you say, so if you're Filipino, you know that. Siguro kaya ganito dahil, right? But in Thai, you always say, okay, so this is the data. แสดงว่าเป็นแบบนี้, right? So it's something like that. But the professional way of saying it is we attribute this anomaly to the high levels in chromium that we found in water. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, I forgot to define the word corroborate. So collaborate is helping each other to come up with a result. Corroborate means to confirm, okay? Confirm or give support to a statement. So like in this sentence, this data strongly corroborates, or in other words, it supports the hypothesis. Okay, so don't complicate it. So it's to confirm, so it confirms or supports. But you can use this if you want to sound fancy and you sound smarter, therefore the heads will be turning like, who's that? Okay, so they're using a deeper word, corroborate. All right. Most of the time, if you go to the conference and you stand there in front of the stage, so presentation is easy because it's always scripted. So you have your slide, so you study the slide and everything goes smoothly, right? But the nightmare of Thai doctors that I know is that they're so afraid with Q&A, so it makes them anxious. So it brings a lot of anxiety. Q&A, because it's impromptu. You cannot script it, right? So when people are asking you if an American or a European doctor asks you something, you're afraid, oh my, so how will I understand every detail, like the words that they're saying? That's why it's also important for you to be familiarize yourself with the language of scientific people in other regions so you can practice with a coach. Most of them, they speak fast, and the technique is you try to get the keywords. Okay, there will be key phrases in their questions, and then you try to connect the dots. Okay, so there are ways on how you can buy 5 seconds of thinking. So if someone asks you something and you feel that it's so complex, most of us, we need time, like 5 seconds of thinking time. Another trick is to pause. So we're already talking about that, like the power of pause. So you give yourself time to think. But there's also another thing called the validation loop. Okay. For example, this one. You validate the question first. That is incredibly astute observation regarding the sample size. So let's dissect that specific variable. Okay, so astute meaning you are the one who questions you is showing the ability to notice and understand situations clearly, especially in a way that gives you an advantage. So you are giving them the validation that they have the ability to notice these details. So, or you can also say, thanks for pointing that out, right? So you say, thanks for pointing that out. Next is, thank you for bringing that parameter to light. Our current data pool indicates that. Okay, so thank you for pointing that out. In simple English, thank you for pointing that out. But if you want to sound fancy and more credible, you can use this phrase, like, thank you for bringing that parameter to light. Our current data pool indicates that. So you have this data pool, massive data. So you try to summarize and don't show them the massive data. So you want to be concise at the same time looking credible. So have a great posture, be confident, prepare for possible questions. You can try practicing with a friend and do like a mock presentation when you get to the stage. Maybe you will be presenting to the UN or WHO, World Health Organization. So when you face those high ranking individuals in your field, like medical field, you will feel more confident if you have one-on-one practice with a friend or maybe a group of people or a group of coaches. That's why if you are presenting an abstract, let's say in 3 to 6 months, so you don't need to leave your professional reputation to chance, please. Okay. So this can destroy your career because if you get too nervous and you go to the up in the stage and you mess up, you have like a mental block, so it can be a devastating experience. And I know how it feels like you want to be buried in the ground like in that moment because you don't know how to answer those questions. So you have solid data, world class data, 4K, like what we say. Your brain is 4K. So you have a broadband connection like the internet, but your delivery is like dial up. Okay. So you can scan this QR code on the screen or link in the description below so that you can schedule like a 15-minute audit. And we have coaches who can train you, do like one-on-one coaching practice, and at the final stage we have like a mock up, so we can have like a mock presentation with a real panel from universities around the world. So if you are serious with your presentation skills. And let's say you're a doctor, you are a medical researcher, and you want to up your game. So don't hesitate to connect with us. Okay. So I'll see you in the next live session. Bye.